what we're going to cover today. I think you all know this, but just in case we have any newbies today, what is a Labinar? Well, it is a web-based learning lab, and we want to give content and some good info to folks today, but we also want to have some engagement and a little bit of interactivity as best we can in this sort of format. So we will be doing that. With that being said, we do have a few Zoom ground rules for today. So if I could just introduce Abby Rowland, fellow from the Patterson Foundation, to share these ground rules, that would be great. Abby, are you there?
Hi, Mike, I'm here. Yeah, thanks everyone for joining today. I know you've heard all of these before, but just a few reminders. If you could please rename yourself to include your first and last name and your organization's name, and that way we can see where everybody's coming from. That would be great. If you need help with that, just let us know in the chat box. Right now, all participants are muted to cut off background noise, so please stay muted throughout. If you do have any questions or comments, feel free to pop them in the chat box. We'll respond to as many as we can as time permits during the Labinar. And if we're not able to respond to the question during the meeting itself, we'll definitely follow up with you afterwards. And finally, this Labinar is being recorded and it'll be available on the TPF website after this.
Okay, good. Thank you, Abby. So why are we here? Well, we're here for a few reasons, but the most important is to help strengthen you and your nonprofits through what we call mission-centric, economically informed decision-making. And ultimately, this is all about reminding ourselves as nonprofit leaders, board members, and staff members that it's so important to ensure that mission guides what you do within your organizations. And while intuitively we believe that everything we do is mission focused, sometimes it just doesn't happen that way because things happen. But at the same time, we also want you to look at economic impact. And we're going to dive in today and talk about that in particular. And ultimately, this is all about applying some rigor and discipline to the strategic decision-making process. So that's why we're here. As I said, we have an action-packed hour. Briefly introducing our team, we're going to do a quick flashback, again, to remind those of you who were here with us for Labinar number 1 and Webversation number 1, what we covered. And then we're going to dive into our decision-making framework, talking about economic-centric decision-making, and then we're going to bring together this combination of mission-centric and economically informed decision-making so that you can see how they work together. And then we'll talk about what's next. So we did have 43 people registered for today's session. As of a few minutes ago when we started, I think there were just under 40. So Abby, I don't know how many have joined. If you can see how many are here with us now?
35. We have 35 total.
35, okay, good. So again, comprised of EDs, CEOs, board members, and staff members. Again, that's important because we believe that bringing those teams together only helps you be stronger, have better conversations, and to have more buy-in as you go. So a number of organizations representing all 4 counties in our region. Okay, let's get started with our first poll question. So Abby, if you could bring up poll question number 1.
All right, can everyone see the poll question? I'll take that as a yes. So which Disney character best matches your organization's decision-making tendencies? So are you Winnie the Pooh? Are you Dory from Finding Nemo? Are you Jafar from Aladdin? Are you Mary Poppins? Are you Jiminy Cricket from Pinocchio? Or are you Peter Pan? So which one's best matches your organization's decision-making tendencies? seeing a lot of Mary Poppins, which is good, which I think is probably a good sign. But across the board, no Winnie the Poohs yet. We'll give everyone a couple more seconds to kind of pick which Disney character matches your organization's decision making. A few Jafar. I don't know really how to, I'm not sure exactly what that means for your decision making, but all right, we'll give 5 more seconds and we'll end and share results. Okay. All right, so Mary Poppins is the winner with the majority, 56%, and then a few others sprinkled throughout. So Mike or Larry, any thoughts?
Well, when it comes to decision making, there are so many different ways to accomplish it. Of course, Mary Poppins is probably the more neat and orderly of all these options. And then, of course, the various other options really point to slightly different methods and modes of decision making, and that's okay. The reason we ask this question is to just encourage you to think about how do you go about doing your decision making, and of course, being in Florida, applying it to the Disney character of your choice is a good thing. So with that,
I looked at it, Mike, as a little bit of magic taking place there.
That's it. Again, I'm Mike Oxman. I'm one of the managing partners and principals in No Margin, No Mission. And that guy you just heard from, Larry Clark, is the other managing partner and principal. I'm zooming in from Chicago today, and Larry's in the great Pacific Northwest, Tacoma, Washington. Abby Rowland, you just heard from. She is a fellow at the Patterson Foundation. Josephine Eisenberg was going to join us today, but she couldn't at the last minute. So in her place, we do have Michael Corley with us today. So Michael, sorry we didn't get you onto our slide today, but you can certainly say hello and wave to everybody.
Hello, everybody.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, quick flashback to our previous Labinar #1. Abby, take it on.
All right, so let's go back a little bit in time. So in our last Labinar, we talked about kind of current reality. And I think at this point, we're continuing to ask how long will the effects of the pandemic last, even as we're moving more toward kind of a state of normalcy. So I would imagine you're still making tough decisions. You've made a number in the previous year, and there will probably be more ahead as well. So as you're making those, a reminder to consider your new realities, anticipate your what ifs, revise your annual plans and budgets, and think about how you're going to deploy those precious financial resources. And as you're making those decisions, you're setting course and you're forging ahead. So again, we're still living in uncertain times. We haven't quite figured out what the next realities will look like yet. Situations are still changing daily, weekly, monthly as cities and states are making decisions on how to reopen and in what ways to do so. And so, we're thinking about how can we make decisions as we continue to ride along this roller coaster. So again, even though it seems like we're moving beyond COVID, think about even in regular times, you're often required to make decisions rapidly to address changing circumstances. So when you're thinking about all of that, think of it kind of through the lens or in the setting of cope, adapt, and innovate. So we introduced this in the last Labinar. And so we're hoping your organization has had time to reflect, to think about, and to discuss these questions. So, what phases have you been in? What decisions have you made? In each of those phases, how have you made those decisions? What have the outcomes of those decisions been? And if and how would you make those decisions differently next time? So in addition to making decisions in uncertain times, we would imagine that you've made a lot of decisions in general. So again, you've had to make them very quickly without having a lot of time to mull them over. So, thinking through that, we're living in uncertain times and you're having to make a lot of those decisions in those uncertain times. How can you ensure that your decision-making moving forward will help you become stronger and more thrivable? So with that, last Labinar, we also introduced making decisions with a mission-centric lens. So with that lens, if you're thinking, for example, if you need to cut your budget by $100,000, the mission-centric lens means that your mission impact will guide your decision-making. So you'll, once you conduct an analysis of the mission impact of your programs, of your services, of your products, you'll make cuts based on the mission contribution of each of those programs, those services and products. So mission will guide how you make your decisions related to your budget. So all of that being said, everyone received an assignment and we encouraged you to work on a couple exercises with your team. So cope, adapt, and innovate discussion questions and thinking through that 3-step process related to mission-centric decision-making. So what are your mission, your goals, and your results? What's the inventory and how are you ranking those? And providing further information and analysis about how you're making those decisions. So a handout was provided. We hope that you were able to do that within the last 2 weeks, but if not, we would definitely encourage you to do so as soon as you can. So we have another poll question for you. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that now. And it is related to what your team was able to do after the last Labinars. So what did your team do to follow up on those 2 assignments, the cope, adapt, and innovate, and the mission-centric lens questions shared during Labinar 1? So you met, discussed, and completed both. You met, discussed, and started at least one. You had conversations about them, but you didn't make any movement on either assignment yet. And nothing other things emerged that required your attention, which we also understand. So we'll give, answers are coming in fast and furious, a wide variety of them as well. It looks like a number of people have really been thinking through some of these questions, which is great to see. So we'll give probably about 10 more seconds for everyone to answer. And no shame if other things emerge. We know that happens. And like we said, you've had to make a lot of decisions quickly and they're constantly requiring a lot of attention. Awesome. All righty, so we'll go ahead and end the poll, share the results. And so, we got a tie here. So 34% of you met, discussed, and completed both assignments. And another 34% had conversations about the questions. And then a hefty margin also met and discussed at least one of those assignments. So that's great to see. Mike and Larry, any additional thoughts?
Just to echo what you said, we're glad to see that most of you have been able to have some conversation, and that's a great thing. Take action on these tools that we've provided to you, start to have those conversations and apply some of the rigor and the discipline to your decision-making that we've been discussing. Larry, anything from your perspective?
Oh, it's great.
Okay, well then let's keep moving. So what we'd like to do now is to move into our second mode of decision-making, and that is through an economic informed lens. So again, as Abby said, during Labinar number 1, we looked at decision-making through a mission-focused lens. So in this scenario, here's the way it would work. And many of you in your organizations have approached decision-making in this manner at some point along the way. Oftentimes we found that during the pandemic, especially when it hit and it hit hard, there was a need to do this. Okay, so we need to reduce our budget by $100,000 or whatever the amount is. Okay, then the decision-making starts to kick in. and the dollars are going to guide that decision making. So $100,000 needs to be cut. We're going to look to those activities that we're undertaking as part of our budget and start slashing the ones that are going to help us get to that $100,000 cut as quickly as possible. Okay, so we're going to cut our marketing. We're going to cut our communications. We're going to eliminate our costly programs. We're going to eliminate our costly services. We're going to reduce our staff and our consultants and their salaries. So imagine, if you will, that you're going to find all of those line items that help you get to $100,000, and boom, they're going to be gone. Okay? So that's an example. Now, if we're to focus on perhaps a better way to do economic informed decision making, what would we suggest you do? And please pay close attention to this, because this will be one of your homework assignments. Okay, so we've got the step-by-step process, all right? So step number one is look at your most recent 12-month projected operating budget, okay? It could be from this most recent 12 months, or it could be from the 12 months prior. But the goal here is to have a full year projected operating budget that you're looking at, referring to, and working from. Once you've got that, the second step is to identify what financial goals did you have in place. And presumably you did have some financial goals in place. So, for example, you may have had specific goals for grants. You may have had specific goals for donations. You may have had specific goals for any earned income activities or social enterprise or entrepreneurial ventures that you have in place. You may have had financial goals for various events that you do, fundraising events, galas, and so forth. So again, what financial goals did you have in place? And then step three is to look at what did you specifically achieve against each of those financial goals? How did you do? And I guess, again, have you tracked those? And do you have the ability to look back at them to say, we did well, we didn't do well, or we did okay? So once you've done that, the second step here is then to take an inventory. And this is really key, because what really is important in economically informed decision making is to have a sense for each of your programs, your products, your services, and to then refer back to that list and inventory them. So just as we've done here, okay, you can see each one of these programs, products, and services are listed. The goal then would be to order them from high to low in terms of their return to your organization. And when we talk about return, financial return, we mean revenue minus expense. So, year-end financials. And again, order them. So just as you see here, we've got programs, products, and services rank ordered in terms of high return, medium return, and low or no return. Okay? So that will help you get a sense for kind of what the pecking order is in terms of those various offerings. But as you can see here, our friend Alexander Miles Thrivemore, who always points out insightful tips and information, financials don't always tell the real story. And we are firm believers in this. We've learned it because we've worked with hundreds of nonprofits. And the reality is that in many nonprofits, the actual costs may not be fully allocated to your programs, your services, and products. And what we mean by that is, how many times have you or we or us said, well, we're not going to allocate certain staff time to a product or program or a service because it's covered by something else. It's covered by a grant. It's covered by our, you may look for reasons why not to include an expense and capture it by product or program or service. And this is something that we want to make sure that you think about and are aware of, okay? So I'm gonna pause there for a moment, and we're gonna bring up another poll question that is directly related to what we just talked about. So Abby?
Yes, thanks, Mike. So our next poll question is launched. It's asking if your organization tracks expenses and allocates them to individual programs, services, and products. So yes, you always allocate those expenses to programs, services, and products. Kind of, some items are lumped together and others are separate. Not really. You track broadly by area, but not specific items. Or where you're thinking, hey, that's a good question, I need to find that out. And so it looks like a number of you, yes, you do track your expenses and allocate them to individual programs, services, and products. Some kind of lump them together and some are separate. Very nice. And then a few, nah, not really. You track by area, or, might be something to kind of poke around and figure out. So we'll give a few more seconds. And I'll go ahead and end and share the results. So yes, the majority of you, 58%, say you always allocate expenses to programs, services, and products. And a number of you also lump some items together and put some other items separately. So Mike or Larry, any additional thoughts?
Well, we'd love to see the yes, absolutely, always. Again, organizations are different. Some are more sophisticated in terms of how they track and apply or allocate expenses to programs, products, and services. So for those of you who are doing that, great. And if you are kind of doing it, that's pretty good. So, we would urge you and your organizations to really look closely to make sure that you are accurately capturing expenses and applying them to your products, programs, and services. And if you ask yourselves that question, and some of your team members, and certainly whoever's helping in your finance area, have a response to that says, well, we don't always do that, it's a good opportunity to reflect and think back. So, and to take some action. So with that, Larry, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about. Oh, no, this is me, right?
No, this is me.
This is you. Okay, go ahead, Larry.
All right, everyone. Good morning. Let's talk about an example. And so think about your organization, but I'll use the organization I used before, which was a Meals on Wheels program. But this is going to be a part of your homework. So listen closely. The first thing you need to do is identify that total revenue and expenses, as Mike said, by program, products, and services for the last 12 months. And we do understand the last 12 months have been challenging for everyone. So as Mike said, if you want to look at the year before, that's okay. But we would still encourage you to look at last year, because you had to make some hard decisions along the way, and a lot of them were economic. So think about that, identify those revenues. And then using the information above, calculate your net profit, revenue minus expenses for each of your programs, products, and services. And as Mike said, staff time is really important to include. And there's one other thing that I'll mention in just a minute that's important to include. But let's dive into the example. So an annual gala or gala or whatever you need to call it. Or in this case, some of you might not do one of those, but you might do a big fundraiser every year. So let's use that as the example. And on the economic side, we put it down at the bottom because it didn't generate that much money, we think. And so we put it at the bottom of our list. But in reality, they generated $75,000 in revenue, and that included all the tickets and the sponsors, donations, auction items, et cetera, throughout the process. And secondly, we looked at our actual expenses, and we had $65,000 in expenses to do a $75,000 event. So those expenses included, as we said earlier, staff, the venue, the food, the bar, the entertainment, the printing. And we don't want to leave this out, your overhead rate. So are you including an overhead rate in this too? So it's a percentage, and you can get that from your accountants or whoever does your finances every year. That should be included in every single one of your programs, products, and services as you're thinking about your actual expenses. And it probably varies between 5% and 25% for a nonprofit, or someplace in between. So think about that, because you want to make sure you include it. So in this case, they had a $10,000 net revenue, which is, pretty good, I guess. Mike? So knowing that, what they did was they moved it up and reprioritized it. So it came from the bottom and moved up to the third program, basically, because they generated a bit more money than they expected to generate out of the gala. $10,000 in basically unrestricted funds. So it's really important when you're thinking about that economic informed decision-making to calculate every single expense against that return. And we just are stressing that over the last few minutes here. Every single item needs to be expensed out, including that overhead rate, which we'd like to see included. So let's do a poll question.
Okay, so our next poll question, just 1 second. So if your organization is hosting that annual gala, or large event, large in-person event, how would you describe the return generated from that event? So is it highly profitable? Is it marginally profitable? Do you break even? Do you not want to talk about it? Who could possibly keep track of the different expenses and revenue generated? And, again, good question. Maybe it's important to find that out. So a number of you are saying highly profitable or marginally profitable. We got a break even there. So we have a few more seconds for everyone to fill that in. I'm glad that no one's saying that you don't want to talk about it. That seems to be a good sign. All righty, well, we'll go ahead and end the poll and share the results. So that's great to see. Most of you have, the vast majority of you, it's either highly or marginally profitable. No one doesn't want to talk about it, and no one's not keeping track. So I think that's positive. No matter how you look at that. So Mike or Larry, anything else with that?
I was just going to mention that 18 organizations, or 18 of you, feel like you can probably do better at this, at marginally profitable or break even. It's probably a great marketing strategy for the organization, but it's supposed to make money. So we want it to make, 30% return, 40% return, something like that. So, and those 10, great job if you're tracking all your expenses to have it highly profitable. So good, and really glad that no one's down below.
Larry, can I just interject for a second? One thing that is interesting, and again, not sure how many of you have actually gone back and looked at the actual financial analysis on it, but as the world went virtual over the past year because of the pandemic, many of your organizations did do virtual galas or fundraising events. And if you look at the financial return of your virtual fundraising events or galas versus those that were held on site, you may see some distinct differences. It's a good exercise to go through if you haven't done it. Larry and I have seen in our work with many organizations over the course of the past year that their fundraisers and virtual galas were actually more profitable than the ones that were held on site. Why? Well, because you were able to cut a lot of the expense out. And in many cases, it just allowed for them to have a higher return on the investment. So again, it may not be the case for your organization, but you won't know it until you've gone through the exercise, which if you do find that you had a higher return because you did a virtual event, it may mean that for your decision making for this year and next year and even in subsequent years, you may want to keep or include virtual fundraisers and galas in those offerings that you provide as part of your organization. So again, just something to think about, to flag, and to go back and look at, perhaps even as part of the homework that we're sharing with you today. Okay, let's go on. So we just went through what we called economic informed decision-making. During Labinar number 1, we shared mission-centric decision-making. So now decision method 3 is let's bring them together. So this idea that you actually can make some strategic decisions in the organization by looking at both a mission-centric and an economically informed lens. All right, so combining the two. So again, we have a step-by-step process that we'll walk you through, and it does help to make this a little bit easier for you to do within your organizations if you follow the step-by-step. So what we want you to do is, once you've got sort of the outcomes of the two approaches to decision-making, so the work that you did following Labinar number 1, where you were actually able to take your various products, programs, and services and rank order them based on their mission impact, then put that side by side with what you're going to do following today's session, the process that we just walked through with an economically informed decision-making process, and prioritize or rank order those. When you put them side by side, it gives you a framework for analysis. So again, if you can take those rank order of your products, programs, and services and assign each of them to a high, a medium, and a low or no impact category, just as we've done here. It's not scientific, but you'll see you're able to sort of rank order them and assign the high, medium, and low or no impact based on where they sort of naturally seem to fall out. You will then have an opportunity to take those and map them or plot them in what we call a mission and financial return matrix. Now, for those of you who have worked with no margin, no mission in the past, this matrix will not be new to you. But for those of you who have not worked with this in the past, let me just briefly explain it, because it is a simple but very, very valuable tool for decision making. So you can see we have both mission and financial return on the two axes. And then the quadrants actually show on the far top right, high mission, high return. And that's where we've got the smiley face, because that's where ideally you would love to have all your products, programs, and services fall if they could. All right. On the opposite end of that, the bottom lower left side, you've got this low mission, low return quadrant. That's where you don't want your products, programs, and services to fall. So if you find that through your analysis that you have products, programs, and services that fall in that quadrant, you're going to want to think about, how do we either get rid of those, jettison them out because they are a drain, or how might we move them up or over so that they can provide some sort of impact, positive impact for your organization. Now, on the top left quadrant, you can see that heart. This is the quadrant where you will find that many, if not most, of your products, programs, and services live. High mission, low return. That's okay. The goal would be to try to move as many of those over so that they can start to offer some return, whatever that might look like. And remember, this is a continuum. So we're not saying it has to be all the way over here, but can you move it over so it starts to provide some economic impact? And then where you've got this little dollar sign on the bottom right corner, we call that low mission, high return. And you may have programs, products, services, activities that are not big on delivering mission, but they are generating dollars and cents for the organization. And that's okay. If there's a way to make them more mission aligned, great. But it's okay to have some of those here, because again, they might be providing resources, financial resources to the organization. Okay, so go ahead, Larry.
I was going to say, before you move on, Mike,
Yeah.
we have some executive directors who actually print this out and put that on the wall in their office. So when their staff or their board comes up with new ideas, they have a discussion about where does it fit here or where could it fit here? Because you definitely want it above the line. So just some thoughts.
Absolutely. So now, Larry, I'm going to turn it over to you to share an example.
I'm the example guy today, I guess.
Yeah.
So let's go back to gala, your big fundraiser, whatever you want to call it. And let's think about, again, the example that I used before, the Meals on Wheels, where they had $10,000 in revenue, in net revenue that came in. So how did they get that net revenue? They got it from 300 people attended their event. They only budgeted for 200 people, but 300 people showed up. So they should have made more money than what they projected, but they had less sponsors that came in. So both of those combined, they had a $10,000 return. So where does it go on this chart? Right. So it goes up there right between high mission, high margin, kind of up there, kind of in the middle. So they reach more people, but they could have made more money. They didn't quite make what they wanted from their sponsorships. So it kind of fit right there in the middle. So they have a lot of other programs that they do. And where do you think they all go? They do meal distribution, they have a curriculum, they do room rental, because they have a space to do that. They do some training out there in the community. They have a small online store, and they do some nutrition counseling. So let's plot those. This is where they turn out as they looked at all their margin and all their mission. So Mike, before you move on, where do you think in this scenario, if they needed to cut some dollars out of their budget, would they cut it from? And why don't you put it in the chat box where you think they probably need to move, either put some programs on. Oh, Mike, you're not supposed to do that yet. Mike just gave it away. Sorry.
No, I was asking the question. It's just mirroring the question.
No, I didn't. No, it's pointing right at it. That's what I didn't want to have happen, but that's okay. That's okay. So in the chat box, somebody responding? No, nobody's responding yet. It's okay. So in this case, you think about the online store and the curriculum and probably put that on hold. Mike, you can move the slide now. So Alexander's pointing right at it. Probably put those on hold or figure out another way to manage those, whether that's finding a partner that would take them on or winding them down, whatever that might be. So anyway, that's think about decision making using both of those. So now before you move on, Mike, if you're going to look at something that you might be able to expand upon to maybe have a higher margin or higher return, where do you think you would spend some time? Which programs? Any thoughts in the chat box? I know you can't type real fast here. All right, well, in this case, okay, good, right. So meal distribution and probably the gala. You could hopefully generate some more maybe grant dollars or contributions for the meal distribution. And for the gala, you can probably get some additional sponsors. And training and counseling is already high mission, high margin or return. So maybe you can actually build those up and make them even better. So they reach more people and generate more net resources for the agency. So good analysis. So this is what we want you to do, is to think through this process. Think about all your programs and projects, put them on the margin return or mission return matrix, and then have a good discussion internally about what's working, what's not working for us, and how do we make some good calculated decisions on what we might put on hold in the future and what we might be able to grow and why. So let's
Larry, we have a quick question for you. So Jennifer is asking how or why would you classify a gala as high mission or high return in this scenario?
In this scenario, because it generated $10,000 in excess revenue, they were on budget, and it reached a lot of people. They actually reached 100 more people than they wanted to. And during that gala, they're able to share the mission of the organization, hopefully inform more people, and probably get some more donors out of it at the end. So that's why we kind of put it up there as high mission, high return. Okay. Let's move on to the poll question.
All right, everyone. So our last poll question for the day: as you're thinking about your organization's collective array of programs, services, and products, how would you categorize them as a whole? So are they heavy on delivering mission impact? Are they heavy on generating revenue? Are they perfectly balanced? They deliver mission impact and they drive revenue? Are they unfortunately light on both? Or have you never thought about this in this way before, but you will? So we've got a number of people, a lot of perfectly balanced. Great to see that people are really able to drive revenue and deliver on mission at the same time. A number who are more focused on the mission impact. That's good. So we'll give a few more seconds for everyone to kind of think about that question. Okay. So we'll go ahead and end poll and share the results. So 57% of you are your programs, services, products, events are perfectly balanced. So they deliver on the mission impact and they drive revenue. Or a high number of you are also heavy on they're heavy on delivering mission impact. So Mike and Larry, any thoughts?
It's pretty typical what we're seeing. I mean, a large majority of you, 17, are right there in the middle. You're up there in the kind of high mission, kind of where we had the gala. And some of you are delivering high mission impact and you're over on the top left. So be thinking about those programs and projects that you can move to the right. So
I think just another comment, and that is for those of you who said perfectly balanced, delivers mission impact and drives revenue. Again, it's really important, while you may think that, it's important to follow up from today's conversation to go back to do the analysis and to really prove that, so that you totally understand if that is the case. In other words, we find that when we introduce this mode of decision making to organizations, many of them think that they are perfectly balanced. But when they actually go back and apply this rigor, this discipline, and these tools, and do the analysis, that it's actually not the case. So we would urge you to go back and test yourselves to see if the way that you've perceived it is actually the way the numbers bear out for your products, programs, and services. Larry, were you going to say something?
I think just just to add on to what Mike just said, in most cases, what we find is staff time isn't completely allocated to it, and they don't include an overhead rate. So if you do both of those things and they're perfectly balanced, then, awesome.
Good. Well, let's keep moving. So as you start to think about what's next, your assignment is to work on the 2 exercises that we shared today with your team. So the first being to go through that step-by-step process for economic informed decision making. So identify your mission, your goals, and your results, inventory your programs, products, and services, and rank them, and then apply the information and do the analysis that we talked about as part of that 3-step process. And then the second assignment is then to apply both the mission and return matrix to each of your products, programs, and services. So just as we shared, plot those in the various quadrants of the matrix and use that worksheet in order to do that. Okay? And of course, if you haven't done the homework or the assignment that we had given to you during Labinar number 1, please make sure that you do that, because you will need it in order to do the second part of this homework, the mission and return matrix. A couple of other suggested action steps is take the information, the thinking, and the exercises that we've shared with you today, and help others to understand it within your organization. So we know that many of you have 2 or 3 or 4 folks here today, but we do believe that this can be of benefit if you share it with others, because ultimately it can help guide decision-making in other areas. It can provide also education to your board. It can be used for strategic decision-making in other areas. And it can also be applied to planning and management and oversight within your organizations. So just something to keep in mind. So as we're wrapping up, again, coming back to where we started today, we really wanted to give you, again, just some tools, a framework, and ways to think in your own organization about how to strengthen your decision-making, both in terms of a mission-centric and economically informed lens. So as often as possible, ensuring that mission guides what you do, at the same time considering the economic impact. So this constant, interplay between mission and revenue or return, and then applying this rigor and discipline to that process as you go. So we've got a few what's next in terms of the work that's coming at you. Webversation number 2 will be the 4th and final virtual session that we'll hold. That'll be next Thursday, same time, 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock. And importantly, what we'll be covering as part of that Webversation is how to be considered for our consulting support, or consulting sprint, as we call it, from No Margin, No Mission. If your team wishes to move beyond these sessions. Remember, these 4 virtual sessions are a gift. They're a gift from the Patterson Foundation, and we're delighted that each of you could be a part of this. So whether you decide to move forward and apply for this consulting sprint or not, we believe and hope that you will have gotten some good value from AMT and our virtual sessions. So work on those 2 exercises with your team. Start it now. Come with your questions to Webversation number 2. And you can also email us any questions that you might have prior to the Webversation. We do like to get those in advance because it helps us prepare and think about so that we can respond to them, in as proactive a way as possible. Now, just a comment about those of you who wish to apply for the consulting sprint. If you do, or if your organization does have interest, we will have a bit of a process. And what we really want to just impress on you is that we want to make sure your team is ready to proceed to that consulting sprint. So we're going to be looking to those organizations that have demonstrated interest and readiness to delve deeper into this topic. And also, we're going to give consideration to those organizations that have fully participated in our virtual series. So just something to keep in mind. And we will give you more details and information about what it's going to look like to participate in and apply for that consulting sprint. So stay tuned, come to the Webversation next week, and we will share all the details about that. Okay?
There was one question in the chat box about is there a charge for that for the nonprofit? And the answer is no. The Patterson Foundation is very generously offering the service up to each of the nonprofits, and there's no charge for that nonprofit.
Was there any other questions in the chat box? No, okay.
I didn't see any.
So, and one more thing, be certain that you register your team for Webversation number 2. Nobody is registered for that yet. You will receive an invitation, if not today, by tomorrow. So be on the lookout for that. And then once you register for it, you'll get a Zoom link, just as we've done for each of our other virtual sessions. So I guess looks like we've got 5 minutes. And if we can, I think I'm going to take us off of screen share mode and just open it up to anybody who might have questions based on information that we shared today, any of the step-by-step processes for the economically informed decision-making, or the merger of the two, mission and economic informed. So anybody who has a question, feel free to raise your hand. We'll call on you, or type in the chat box. Again, we don't want to assume that what we shared with you today is without question. So anybody?
Mike, I do have a question asking if the slideshow will be available online.
You will get copies of the slides from Josephine Eisenberg as part of the follow-up, just as you did after Labinar number 1. So yes, everybody will get copies of the slides that we shared today. So be on the lookout for those. Other questions, comments, thoughts, aha moments, anything that we should know?
Tom has a question.
Tom, Melville, hello.
Hi there. So I was wondering, is the consulting sprint, is it really focused on like your finances and your decision making, internally to hit these points that you're covering through, the Labinar and the Webversations, or can it be, a project that you might need some help or consulting on that impacts all that. So I wasn't quite sure if it's, if it's sort of narrowly focused on specific things as far as, advancing mission thrivability in one specific area, or could it be, broadened to a different area or need? It could be a different product. I know we're interested in sort of revamping our communications strategy and messaging. I just didn't quite know, what the flexibility was, with this project, if you are selected, could you be focused on that, or is it something that you have more specifically in mind?
Good question. And well, two parts to that. One is we will share more about what the consulting sprint will look like during.
Whoops. Mike just froze. So what he was going to say was that we will share. Oh, Mike, are you back?
Well, go ahead, Larry.
No, you froze. You froze for a minute there. Go
My
ahead.
internet connection is unstable, so you talk.
We will dive into that, Tom, on our next week during the session. But each one of the organizations that we've worked with in the past, the focus has been a little different. It's still around decision making and how you make those decisions within. It could be a project, or it could be organizationally, or it could be from the leadership team to the board. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to look at it. And every organization that we've worked with is a little bit different, because you've seen one nonprofit, you've only seen one nonprofit, right? So so your answer, I guess the answer to your question is probably yes. It's broader than just, looking at your budget and looking at how you make decisions. That makes sense. Now, did I totally confuse you, Tom? No.
No, thank you. At
Okay.
first, I thought it was too hot a question because, it froze Mike, but.
Yeah.
Am I back?
That's his way of deferring it to me, right?
Right.
Yeah, he pushes his free button.
That's it. Yeah, again, I mean, there's quite a bit of flexibility in terms of how we can help your teams with strategic decision making. So Tom, I think, as Larry said, the short answer to that is yes, we'll be able to provide some good consulting help to help you work through that, as long as it's somehow going to impact on better decision making to drive the thrivability of your organization.
Right.
Anybody else have any questions, comments, thoughts, aha moments, insights?
Question.
I kind of had an aha moment. I questioned why you would put the gala in under high mission, high return. I would consider it high return and low mission. But when you said it was reaching out to people, then I work for Habitat, so I kind of remembered our mission statement is part of that is bringing people together to provide homes, communities, and hope. And I thought, oh, so things fit into our mission that aren't necessarily going out and repairing or building a house. And that was a big aha moment for me, because I had never really thought of those things as completing our mission. I always thought of them as supporting our mission with them. So thank you.
You're welcome. It's a lot of times those, even if they break even, it's a great way to get your message out and to share your message. Yeah. Hopefully some new people that come to the event, whatever that event might be, whether it's a breakfast or a lunch or an evening. And it hopefully increases your donor base. It increases more people that would go to your store, whatever it might be. So hopefully you can drive your mission through those folks.
Well, we're at that hour. We've actually gone 1 minute over. So in the interest of honoring everybody's time, we're going to wrap today's Labinar. We want to say thanks to all of you for participating, for joining us. And please reach out to us with questions. Email us. We will get back to you. Come to next week's Webversation. And let's keep this AMT process moving. So thanks to everybody. We're delighted that we could all be together for an hour this morning, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.